Click the links to join the channel. Thank you for the recent members here and on Subscribestar and Patreon. So they say it's a different era than these shows used to be made in, which is, keep in mind the shows weren't made 100 years ago. But my point is, this show and Rings of Power actually kind of I can't quite let these topics go. They annoy me, and I feel that more people should be crapping on them, just bringing attention to them. Just to crap on them, just to kind of put it out into the universe that this stuff needs to be made fun of. So they go, it's a different era. Okay, fair enough. Yes, we all know the reference to the soft Bolshevik Revolution, the 2020 summer of love, that it's going to go down and like how the victor writes the history and how they write down the history. You look at it and you go, holy shit, so who's been winning this whole time? Because it sure as hell isn't us. It's like, yeah, that's the point. The victor writes the history. You, sir, are no victor. So is kowtowing to whatever cultural winds are shifting and blowing with this rudderless ship, is that like where you want to be? Is that the hill you want to die on? To say, oh yeah, because of the summer of love, 2020, we're gonna change everything around. Or even if it wasn't for that, they probably would have changed it around anyway, because this is just the way things are going. Until you stop it or divest yourself from these people, this is just the way it completely goes. And obviously, the easiest way to stop it is just not supporting it financially. But like, what does it say about your show and the principles and the artistic original vision? Though in this case, I'm sure the artist it would be totally on board with it, because he seems like kind of a left-wing guy himself. But like, what does it say about, I don't know, the sanctity of the original artistic vision that you're willing to go along with any fad whatsoever? It kind of makes you feel like, oh, so this is just a commercial enterprise. Like, you have no connection to the art of the story that you created, that, loosely based on European mythology and the European story, which is why, like, an image like this, you look at this and you're like, what the hell am I looking? It's the hair. I mean, so much of this seems like a mockery that I can't be the only one who's thinking this. Even if you're of this same these gentlemen group, like, if you're of this group, like, there's got to be some point where you're looking at this and rolling your eyes and thinking, like, yeah, wouldn't it have been better to tell our own stories than to have to climb on some, I don't know, J.R.R. Martin or whatever. I don't know where he's from, America or UK or something, but to jump on someone else's story and it's like, that's the best, that we're these little puppets that can be swapped out willy-nilly to own the conservatives, or to like, as pawns. And I'm not going after the actors. They're, you just do what you're paid to do. But I mean, like, the culture in general, if you're part of this group and you're looking at this thing and you're like, is this something to be proud of? I don't think so. And I can say that as someone who's like, I don't have a whole lot of involvement in either one of those issues, that group of people, or even the love of the show, because it wasn't really, it was too fantasy for me, where Lord of the Rings was more action adventure. But like, to look at this and think like, oh yeah, this isn't us. This isn't our people. This isn't our organic story. Why aren't you telling an organic story out of Africa? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's weird that, like, you don't put some money into that. It doesn't, I mean, he goes, oh, so what did we do? We came up with the Woman King. Like, dear sweet Jesus, no, that's not an organic story either, because that's not what happened. The history of the Woman King is like, that's out. Oh, that bomb, by the way, in case you're wondering, it needed over $100 million to cross over from red ink to black ink, like $125 million, and it is not ever going to cross over. It's like, but that's not an organic African story either. You'd be better off with Henry Rider Haggard's stories, which are obviously just pure fiction, but he covered the subject in such a respectful way. Keep in mind, the stories are 150 years old, and you got to read them for yourself if you don't know what I'm talking about. He was very even-handed in his treatment of, he wrote stories. The guy wrote probably 100 books. You'd be better off just picking up one of those stories and telling a more accurate, I mean, it's hard to say fantasy is accurate. It's not that. It's something that's more in line, that's just not so ridiculous, with the case of like a Woman King. It's like, that's you're quoting like history, real historical tribes, occurrences, places, people's places and things, but you're changing the most important part of it because you don't want to make this one group of people the bad guys. but it's like the history is all over the place. I mean, you can't hide something like this. We have the internet. We don't need an encyclopedia to look up the history. It's like it's way too far. But like, I'm not saying. The thing is, Hollywood is never going to tell like the real story of the woman king, which would be a good story because you just have to accept it and lean into it and get in the mind, like walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak, of where, yes, conquer the tribe next to you. That's what's done. That's accepted. Oh, those are the rules of engagement. Yeah, that's moral and just in that time, but they're trying to judge everything, in 2020's hindsight vision using 2022's current cultural mores, which are not going to be the same in 20 years, obviously. And you go, so what happens when they judge your current behavior now in 20 years or 200 years in the future? Like, wouldn't you want to be judged in the time you're in? It's like, wouldn't you do the same for the Woman King, or do the same for anyone else? It's like, there's a long, complicated reason why they can't do that, because the narrative has got to be pretty much blame the European. So they had to kind of swap out the Woman King to such a ridiculous extent that people look at the movie and goes, this isn't a fantasy universe. This is a real historical setting that you turned into propaganda. It's insane that you think that you would. It's insane that you think you'd manipulate people into watching this kind of stuff. So no, I mean, if you're of the Black community, you're not going to get anything that you would be proud of. And the thing is, to be fair, no one else is going to get anything that's not propaganda. Everything is going to be propaganda in mainstream Hollywood. Maybe there's a way to create something else, in much smaller budgets, but everything mainstream is going to be, an image like this. You look at this and go, this is just ridiculous. And people hear that and they automatically get triggered because it's, pox on screen. You go, no, you don't have to just be a slave to political correctness brainwashing. You can look at something and just honestly assess it and go, this is ridiculous. This is an insult to everyone involved. I know on both sides of the equation. If I was Black, I'd look at this and I go, yeah, this is ridiculous. Why are you doing this? You're making us look like idiots. And like, not just looking like idiots, but looking like pawns, like people who don't have agency. It's like, you can be proud of your own story, even if it is like, oh, you should tell a Shaka Zulu story. It's like, yeah, he did great and terrible things because that was the rules of engagement of the time period, or someone like that. It's like, yeah, tell the Shaka Zulu story, and they would turn it. The thing is, there was good and bad in both sides of everyone involved in that kind of story. The story of the Zulus. That movie's actually on Odyssey, and it's probably on YouTube too. It's like, yeah, there was good and bad people. I mean, it's just a story. It's like, oh yeah, people fought back then. Oh no, it's deeper than that. There's got to be some cultural Marxist propaganda. No, it's just people fought. And if the English weren't there, then the Zulus would fight with the tribe next door, which is what they did all the time. And if the English were in back in Europe, they'd be fighting with the French. It's like, yeah, that's what people did. No, you don't understand. It's got to be the Europeans. It got to be bad in everything they do. Like, but that's just not in accord with historical reality, because it's never been easier than right now to learn history. I mean, you can simply use a tablet and like crack a little bit every day. Anyway, so what a long intro. They make these interesting claims in this article about this show, which is it's too ridiculous to let this go without making some videos about it. That the world is different now than when the show was made. Like, the show was made, what, 300 years ago? No, actually it wasn't. The audience is different, except the first show was a hit because it was authentic. So why would you change a winning formula? Because they're globalist parasites who will use anything they have as propaganda. But the deeper issue is the kind of the Wakanda issue. If you remember that movie that came out 2016, I think, where because of this soft, cringy Bolshevik takeover, people can't criticize a show if it ranks on the oppression matrix hierarchy, which means that some things can't be criticized, which is obviously ridiculous, but that's not a model. I mean, because that's not a model for a functioning civil society, where different groups can effectively hold you hostage by manipulating you via social media and mainstream media pressure. All this is possible because the media is facilitating this narrative. They're directly responsible via their biased reporting. If the media laughed at this globalist nonsense, it wouldn't have any power whatsoever. But the media is on board the globalist agenda. They are the ones fueling it. And I think if you're listening to me for a while, then you know what you know that's true. They have made entire topics haram to discuss. The media doesn't report the news. They are the news. They craft the news. And the media won't back up their own reporters if they just try to actually report the news as unbiased and impartial as possible. That's just not accepted nowadays. Like if a reporter said, you know what, I'm not going to use biologically incorrect pronouns because I feel that's a lie and I don't want to perpetuate a lie in my reporting. I have to be fair and factual and impartial. So I have to use biologically correct pronouns because it's the proper thing to do. Oh, you'd just be fired. You're like, but I took a stand for what is objectively the correct decision because it's a decision that's erring on the side of being objective and unbiased and impartial and being as factually accurate and precise as possible. It's like, yeah, you're still fired though. We just can't have you. We can't have you working in mainstream media if you're not going to use someone's preferred pronouns, not the biologically accurate pronouns. It's like, so you're no longer a news media. You're a propaganda center. It's like, yeah, they started doing that. I noticed the pronoun stuff like 6-8 years ago, maybe, when they started that. And that's when I looked at the media and I go, oh, they're just like completely mask off. They're just, they're not the media. They're not even making an attempt at being the media. Like they were always going to have left-wing bias. But after 9/11, things just kind of started accelerating quickly. So if a reporter gives a woke film the wrong review, he is going to be destroyed on Twitter. Mostly, I think most of the stuff happens on Twitter. He'll have to correct, and that's in quotes, his article. He might even be fired. And the thing is, he'll be under the watchful eye, Sauron's watchful eye of social media forever for having, incorrect or problematic views. It's like, you guys know this is an opinion piece, right? Yes, but your opinion is wrong and you must go to room 101. And how many fingers, Winston? This is where we are now. If a movie has points on the Bolshevik oppression hierarchy, you have to be at that level or above to criticize it, which is just ridiculous levels of Frankfurt School brainwashing that nobody can refute it because the mainstream media and social media will just destroy your life. This has far-reaching consequences, negative ones. Obviously, the pop culture doesn't matter so much because it's cancer. I mean, everything that's come out, and seems like in the past 10 years, not everything, but much of it has just been, you're not missing anything if you turned off the TV, if you turned off the thing like 5 or 10 years ago. You don't have to watch it. But just because you don't watch it, it still has a deleterious effect on society. We have to be free to criticize anyone and anything. Otherwise, they will hide behind these shields, spreading poison while free from criticism. You can't criticize Andor, Star Wars, which, to be fair, nobody is watching. That's a bomb, too. I might even do a video on that. It's like, but hard to do a video on a show that nobody's watching. Some people can pull it off, but usually it's not going to get a whole lot of eyeballs. Unless you're Hispanic or something. I think that's what the reviewer was saying. You have to be like a Hispanic immigrant. Like, oh, it's okay. I identify as one. We don't know what to. We just painted ourselves in a corner there. Or what was that Red Panda movie? Unless you're Asian, that's like some critic reviewed that. Or Rings of Power or House of Dragons. You can't say that the race swap looks just patently absurd. Otherwise, you'll get destroyed and probably fired. Where did we accept? Why did we accept censorship? Like, why are so many people okay with it? Probably because they're acting out of fear. Why are we allowing a small group of social media weirdos to control the narrative? Like, probably because they know that they're just going to get fired if they speak out on anything. So which shows you the power of the gatekeepers. There is only one Twitter, right? And if you control it, you control almost the entire narrative. I think the way to push back on this cancer is, one, obviously don't pay for it. You know what I'm saying? And two, crap on it. Or I guess you could ignore it. But I do think crapping on it is fun, obviously. But it's important to point out the cultural Marxism, European erasure, anti-white hatred. Just use those kind of. It feels silly, admittedly, using buzzwords because I know how manipulative they are. But we have to play by the rules of the game. The left wing uses these, Frankfurt School buzzwords. We have to create our own and use our own, which some people have started using. As long as you say it with a straight face, it kind of flies. You have to say it in that sincere NPR voice. Just at least when you're on Twitter, it's like you know what I'm kind of talking about. Use their same flow back at them, and you can use the same Saul Alinsky Frankfurt School feeling based argument. Just return it back on them. Base everything on emotion. The show's European erasure feels toxic and hateful. We must dismantle these systems of anti-white oppression. It puts them in a position of, well, one, it will piss them off, which is just the funniest thing to do on Twitter. Every once in a while, I wish I was back on Twitter, but I've gone through so many phones. I'm going to have to get another one. It puts them in this position of just flat out saying that they hate you, which is actually good. Because if you're having the discussion on social media, then the other people can see the hatred and they can start to kind of awaken out of the matrix, because hate allegedly is not acceptable on these platforms. And we have a problem because hate is accepted on these platforms if it's against people like you and me, your hazel, green, and blue-eyed heroes. Other middle-of-the-road normies need to see that there is no solution on this current pathway, and that to change things requires awakening people to a different pathway. That was carefully said. Point out everything Hollywood is doing, how they can't create new shows because woke cancer doesn't sell. They can't create anything that people want. All they can do is this bait and switch with old Hollywood properties. Because but of course, in the new ones, they remove the European people from the stories that people fell in love with. And you go, hey, that's kind of weird. Why would you want to essentially digitally genocide an entire group of people? It feels like you're forecasting something. Weird. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Subscribestar. Thanks for the recent YouTube members and the Subscribestar members. You guys are the real heroes. And I'll see you guys all next episode.